Welcome back to another part of our miniature train project. This is going to be part number 9, the cow catcher. For this part, we've got to set it up perfectly, or else we are going to run into issues later. If you don't set it up perfectly the first time, this is one of the parts that I'm sorry, I can't fix. You'll just have to start over and do it again. So listening the first time might be an important part of making this design. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the top and the bottom of this object on one sketch, and then I'm going to project parts of it onto another one to make my loft. So I'm just going to pick any plane that I want, and I am going to use this dot. All right, this is the center of all of the planes. It is a very important dot when you're lining things up. So I'm going to use that as the center of the back of my cattle catcher or cow catcher. Now the distance across is 1.2, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use half of that to go over, and then I'm going to do the whole thing 1.2 across. So now you can see that I have it lined up where the center of this line is the center of my object. Next, it's going to give me the distance away of a straight line of 0.25. So perpendicular, I'm going to put in 0.25, click enter, it made my line. To start another line without canceling out of my tool, all I got to do is hit enter, go up, type in 0.25, click enter. Click enter again. Now I'm ready to use my tool again and not be connected to the previous line. Next, I'm going to want to draw a line down in the center of my cattle catcher or cow catcher. I know the distance is 0.75 out, so if I just click on the center, click 0.75, enter, and you're going to see that I know where these three dots are now. With the knowledge of those dots, all I've got to do is connect them, and I make the lines for the exterior of that shape. Next, I'm going to want to make the shape of the bottom, which is a lot like this. It's just larger. So it's 1.8 all the way across, and I want half of that. So 0.9, remember we're lining it up with the center dot. 1.8, that's all the way across. And the first distance here is 0.25 as well. So all I've got to do is put that in, enter, do the same thing on the other side. I've got those lines. Now the distance from the back to the front, that very tip, is 1 inch. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other one, but with 1 inch. And then I'm going to connect those dots. With that, I have finished my first sketch. This sketch will show me what the top and the bottom of my cow catcher. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out the distance from the bottom and the top. So I'm going to make the YZ plane visible, and I'm going to use that to create another plane. If I click and hold on the edge of that plane, I can drag off of it to make a second one. Now I can see from the bottom to the very top of this object is 0.75. I'm going to put that in there. You can go back and check. See, look at that, two planes parallel to each other. Perfect. Next, I'm going to go ahead, click on this edge of this plane, and I made another sketch. From there, all I've got to do is project my geometry for the top shape. Click Finish Sketch, and I've got the other one set already. Now, I'm going to use that loft command, and it'll let me add sketches. So I'm going to click on Sketch 1, and there's more than one part here. You see when I go over things, it highlights them. I'm going to make sure I have every part clicked on and highlighted. Then I'm going to click Add Sketch 2, click my Sketch 2, and since that was a simple shape, it just picked it for me. So I didn't have to click on anything, it just went ahead and picked it and shows me what my geometry would look like. Once I click OK, it made my shape. If I turn it, I can look at it from the front, and hey, it looks a lot like that cattle catcher over there. Before I start working on other commands, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to turn visibility off the work planes. That way I don't get confused about them and they don't get in my way when I'm doing my other parts of the shape. Now you're going to see in the bottom view and this view here, it shows that it's hollow on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the bottom of my shape, and I'm going to use a command called shell. What this shell does, it makes it so that all the walls are the exact same thickness all the way around my object. So my thickness on here says 0.1, and look at that. That was the first option on there. So I didn't have to change the thickness of my material. Next, what I have to do is I've got to remove a face. Now you can see the bottom is the hollow part, so that is the part I click on. And it removes that face. I click OK, and now my cattle catcher is hollow. All other sides look the same, it just hollowed out the inside. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make these indents on here. It tells me that the thickness at the indent is 0.05. So if the overall thickness is 0.1, the part I'm taking out is 0.05 as well. So I'm going to make a sketch on that surface, and I'm going to use project geometry to give me my shape, and then I'm going to use my offset tool. So after I click on it, I can click on that line and I can make a shape exactly the same as my other shape, just bigger or smaller. So I'm just going to click anywhere in there just because I like to use dimensions on here. I'm just going to click on one line, click on the previous object, and it's going to show me that the distance from the center is 0.1. So all I've got to do is type in 0.1, click enter, and it has accepted my shape. When I click Finish Sketch, all I've got to do is make sure I click on my part, click Cut, it has to be 0.05, Enter, and it cuts that in there. Now at this point, this is where we find out if you made your object correct or not. Because if you can make the sketch on one side, that means you did it partly right. If you're able to make a sketch on the other side, that means you actually made your shape completely right. You didn't have one thing just even partly off. So this is where you find out if it was good or not. If you're able to put them on both sides, great. The rest of this part will be easy for you. So I'm just copying exactly what I did on the other side, dimensioning it, giving it a 0.1, finish. I'm going to extrude that, make sure it's a cut, hit OK, and I'm done with the front side of my shape. Only thing I have left is the pegs that go off the back side. So I'm going to turn to the back side of my shape, make another sketch, and I'm going to put all of my 3 circles on here and extrude them out. To do that, you're going to read some of these dimensions, and to the first peg, it would be 0.275 over, and then I'm going to locate my other pegs as well. So from my corner, I'm going to go in 0.275, click enter, and then the next distance over is 0.625, which is the center all the way across, and that's pretty much all the way set for me. I'm going to go 0.625 again because it is 1.25 all the way across. 0.625 plus 0.625 is that dimension. Last but not least is I can even check on this, and if my dimension on this other side here is exactly the same, let's just finish off that line. Alright, if my dimension of this part is exactly the same as the other side, then I know I made it right. When it accepts that like that, that dimension is called a driven dimension. You can't change the number on that. It is just there to show you what was the leftover space. Now I'm going to bring this dimension down just so it's not in my working area, and then I'm going to bring lines vertically to know the location of each of the centers of the circle. You're going to see on the side here it says the lower ones are 0.125 up, and I'm going to just type that in, hit enter to do the command again, and I have the centers of both those circles. Once I have that set, I'm also going to do the center in the height in the center, which says 0.625. So 0.625, enter, and I've got it set up for all 3 circles. Now from here, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm just going to draw these circles. No biggie, don't know my sizes, but I can go ahead and I can dimension them afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to dimension one circle, and that is 0.125 as well. So you can see that size, 0.125, hit enter. And then I'm just going to go for each of the other circles, and I'm going to click on my first dimension. I'm a little lazy, I don't want to type it in more than one time. And I have all three circles. I can finish this sketch and I can extrude those. So make sure you're getting just the circles. And 0.05 is not the right size. It says my distance out is 0.125. I click OK, and I have those sticking out. Now you're also going to see on that part there's that little edge on there. And it gives me some dimensions on here. It says 0.01 at 45 degrees. What that means is I have a chamfer. So I'm going to click on chamfer, tell it that size, 0.01, and then I'm going to click on that edge of each circle. If I apply that, there you go, you're going to see that chamfer. And that is the last part of this object. We are now done with the cow catcher.